My name is Marcus, 38 years old, a tech entrepreneur with a net worth of roughly $250 million. At first glance, you might think my life is nothing but success and luxury. And yes, in many ways, that's true. But you know, even the brightest success stories have shadows. And the story I'm about to tell you is about those shadows, the ones that shaped me into who I am today. When I was 8, my parents suddenly drove me to a small mountain town in Colorado, leaving me on the doorstep of my grandfather's weathered log cabin. I stood frozen on the wooden porch, gripping the faded duffel bag my mother had thrust into my hands that morning. The thin mountain air bit through my jacket, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and distant snow from the peaks above. My parents knocked twice, then turned and left as quickly as if they were dropping off a package. Their SUV kicked up dust as it disappeared down the winding mountain road, never once slowing down. Their final words were brief. "We need to focus on our careers." I believed them, but something deep inside whispered, "They're never coming back." A moment later, the heavy oak door creaked open. My grandfather Samuel stood there, tall and solid as the mountains behind him, his calloused yet gentle hands pulling me into a firm embrace. "Come on in, son," he said, his voice gravelly, yet somehow soothing. I quietly dragged my bag across the threshold, my chest tight with confusion. The cabin smelled of aged wood and strong coffee, mixed with the earthy scent of a crackling fire in the stone hearth. He showed me to a small loft room where a thick quilt covered a simple bed, and a window framed the endless Colorado wilderness. That night I lay awake staring at the wooden beams above, trying to picture my parents' faces in the darkness. "They'll come back for me, right?" But all that answered was the mountain wind whistling through the pines, cold and indifferent. In the days that followed, I existed like a ghost. I barely spoke, never smiled, and answered my grandfather with single syllables, but he never pressured me. Every morning he woke before dawn, the hiss of the coffee percolator filling the kitchen before he headed out to tend the animals. Meanwhile, I sat alone at the rough-hewn table picking at the scrambled eggs he'd made, my heart empty. I missed Denver, the busy streets, and even the constant bickering between my parents. At least then I had them. Here it was just me, my grandfather, and the overwhelming silence of the mountains. One afternoon I found him in the workshop behind the cabin, repairing an old generator. Sweat glistened on his weathered face, his hands black with engine oil, yet his eyes brightened when he spotted me. "Come here, Marcus, try holding this socket wrench." I hesitated before stepping closer, my small hands shaking as they gripped the cold metal tool. He patiently guided me through loosening a bolt, his steady, calm voice encouraging, "You've got this, just take your time." I struggled with it, awkward and uncertain, but finally the bolt turned. He let out a warm chuckle that echoed off the workshop walls. "There you go, natural mechanic in the making." For the first time in weeks, something in my chest loosened just a little. But when darkness fell, the fear returned. In my dreams, I saw my parents standing at the end of a city street waving goodbye. I screamed, running toward them, but they dissolved like morning mist. I woke gasping, my shirt damp with sweat. In the darkness, I wondered who I really was, just an unwanted child, a burden to my grandfather. I wanted to ask him if he truly wanted me here, but I couldn't. I was terrified of the answer, terrified that even he was just enduring my presence out of obligation. Time passed, and I slowly adapted to mountain life. My grandfather never mentioned my parents, but he always found ways to pull me out of my spiral. Each day brought new tasks, feeding the chickens, chopping firewood, or helping repair the solar panels. "Hard work builds character, Marcus," he said, his eyes serious yet kind. I didn't fully understand, but I did it because I wanted to make him proud. One day he led me to the workshop's back room. Inside it was packed with electronics tools and dusty computer parts. "This is where I used to innovate," he said, gesturing to a workbench covered with motherboards and LED arrays. He told me about his younger days as a software engineer, creating programs others thought impossible. "You could do it too, if you're interested." I looked at him doubtfully. I was just an 8-year-old kid. What could I know about programming? But he didn't give up. He started teaching me basics, how to write simple code, how to solder connections, how to troubleshoot systems. I made countless errors, but he never lost patience. Mistakes are how we learn, Marcus. Nobody starts out perfect. His words were like cool water on a burn, easing some of the hurt inside me. I began to treasure those afternoons in the workshop, just us and the smell of heated solder. One evening he told me about my parents. Not much, just a few careful sentences. They have their own journey, Marcus, but you're not them. You're your own person. I wanted to ask why they left me, but I couldn't form the words. I was afraid the truth would break me. Instead, I nodded, focusing on the circuit board he handed me, helping him complete a simple LED array. When the lights blinked to life, I smiled genuinely for the first time in months. He squeezed my shoulder. See, you're capable of amazing things. When I turned 11, he enrolled me in a coding club at the regional middle school. I was the youngest, surrounded by teenagers. I was terrified of embarrassing myself, but he said, "Just give it a shot, Marcus. You're as capable as anyone." I brought home programming books and spent hours in the workshop writing code and debugging. He sat nearby, never interfering, only offering encouragement when I asked. "You're doing great," he'd say, and I felt myself stand a little straighter. At 13, I entered a statewide app development competition. My app, a simple program that helped elderly people manage medications, was the result of countless hours of work between my grandfather and me. The night before the competition, I couldn't sleep, anxiety coursing through me. He sat with me at the kitchen table making hot chocolate. "You've given it your all. Win or lose doesn't define you. What matters is you didn't quit." I looked at him, this man with gray hair and gentle eyes, and knew I couldn't disappoint him. On competition day, I stood before the judges, my heart hammering. When my app flawlessly demonstrated its features and was declared the winner, I could barely process it. I rushed outside and called him. "I won," I shouted into the phone. He laughed deeply, his voice thick with pride. "I never doubted you for a second." That evening, he organized a small celebration at the cabin. Just a few neighbors, a homemade chocolate cake, and bluegrass music from an old stereo. I sat on the porch steps watching everyone laugh and share stories. My heart swelled with an unfamiliar warmth. I realized that even without my parents, I had found family. My grandfather, the mountains, and the people who believed in me. But buried deep, I still wondered, why didn't my parents want me? That question remained like a splinter, waiting for the day I'd be brave enough to pull it out. In the years following my competition win, I felt a new confidence building. I was no longer the silent boy who hid in corners. At school, I became known as the App Kid, a title my classmates used with genuine respect. I didn't mind it. Every day after school, I hurried back to the cabin, eager to dive into the workshop where my grandfather and I tackled increasingly complex projects. He taught me advanced algorithms, system architecture, and how to learn from failure. "Every bug is a teacher, Marcus," he'd say, adjusting his reading glasses, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I'd nod, though sometimes I wanted to throw my laptop when code wouldn't compile. At 15, I began noticing my grandfather wasn't just a simple mountain dweller. The encrypted phone calls he took late at night, the mysterious trips to Denver he called meetings, and how he'd change the subject when I asked questions. Everything sparked my curiosity. Once I caught sight of a letter on the kitchen counter from a major venture capital firm in Boulder. I asked about it, but he just smiled. "Old business dealings, nothing to worry about." I didn't push, but I knew there was more to his story. Those years were bittersweet. I loved our life in the mountains, the crisp morning hikes, where he taught me to track deer, the scent of pine smoke from our fireplace. But questions about my parents gnawed at me constantly. I tried not to dwell on them, but every time I saw families in town, parents picking up their kids from school, sharing inside jokes, my chest ached. I wondered where they were, what they were doing, and why they'd never even sent a birthday card. My grandfather seemed to sense my pain. He never forced conversations, but he kept me focused on building, creating, learning, as if he knew staying busy was the best therapy. At 16, I embarked on my biggest project yet, developing an AI assistant for students with learning disabilities. It was his suggestion. "Create something that matters, Marcus," he said one evening as we watched the sunset paint the Rockies gold. "Your skills should improve lives." I spent nearly a year on it, missing parties and social events. He supported every step from finding research papers to introducing me to a professor at CU Boulder for guidance. When the AI assistant was complete, it wasn't just software, it was proof of everything we'd built together. That project earned me a spot at a national tech conference in San Francisco. For the first time, I left Colorado standing among hundreds of young innovators from across the country, feeling impossibly small. But when I presented, watching my AI smoothly adapt to different learning styles, I caught sight of my grandfather's proud face in the audience. I won first place this time, not second. He still hugged me just as tightly, whispering, "You've made me prouder than you'll ever know." On the flight home, I dozed off against his shoulder, feeling more secure than ever. Then came my 18th birthday. It was a cold, snowy day in February, the mountains wrapped in white silence. I woke early to the sound of him moving around the kitchen. The aroma of fresh cinnamon rolls filled the cabin, mixed with his favorite Johnny Cash playing softly. I smiled, knowing he was preparing his annual surprise. But something felt different that day. He called me down, his voice more solemn than usual. "Marcus, come sit with me." I sat across from him at the kitchen table, a plate of cinnamon rolls between us and a small cedar box beside them. He pushed the box toward me, his gaze intense and meaningful. "Open it." I hesitated, my pulse quickening for no clear reason. Inside lay an elegant titanium bracelet, the inner band laser-etched with the words, "Build tomorrow." I looked at him, puzzled. "What's this?" He took a long breath, as if preparing for something monumental. "This bracelet was mine, now it's yours. It's not just jewelry, it's a promise. Live with intention and build a tomorrow worth inheriting." His voice carried weight that made me shiver. I fastened the bracelet on my wrist, feeling its presence like an anchor. I wanted to ask more, but he redirected the conversation, insisting I eat the rolls while they were warm. The morning passed with familiar laughter and stories, but I kept glancing at the bracelet. It felt significant, like it held secrets I wasn't ready to understand. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, I finally gathered my courage. "Grandpa," I said, my voice unsteady, "why did my parents leave me? Why did they abandon me with you?" The question I'd carried for 10 years finally escaped like a dam bursting. I feared he'd deflect again, but he met my eyes directly, sadness mixed with determination in his gaze. "Marcus," he began, "your parents weren't evil people, but they were consumed by ambition and greed." He spoke deliberately, each word carefully chosen. "When he was building his tech company years ago, my parents attempted to steal his intellectual property and company shares while he was traveling overseas. They thought he wouldn't discover their scheme, but he did. He confronted them, threatening to donate everything to charity rather than let them profit from betrayal. Furious at being caught, they left, and they left me behind without a second thought." I sat frozen, processing his words. I expected tears, but instead felt a cold fury mixed with deep sadness. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Because I wanted you to grow up believing in possibility, not weighed down by their failures," he answered. "But now you're old enough for truth, and you're old enough to choose your path." He gripped my shoulder firmly. "My assets, all of them, are yours now. Not because I pity you, but because you've proven yourself worthy." I stared at him, stunned. Assets? I'd never considered money. To me, he was just a mountain man in flannel who made the best coffee in Colorado. But he shook his head when I tried to question further. "Don't worry about details now. Just live well, Marcus. That's all I want." That night, I lay in bed watching the bracelet gleam in the moonlight. It wasn't just a gift, it was a declaration that I belonged here with him, with myself. But deep down, I sensed change coming. The truth about my parents, the assets, the bracelet, all pieces of a larger picture I wasn't ready to see yet. Then autumn arrived, painting the Colorado mountains in brilliant amber and rust. The aspen groves shimmered like gold coins in the breeze. My grandfather and I maintained our routines: dawn hikes through the changing leaves, afternoon coding sessions in the workshop. But I noticed him slowing down. He'd pause while chopping wood, hands on his lower back, breathing heavily. "Just the altitude reminding me I'm not 30 anymore," he'd joke when I expressed concern. "Give me a minute to catch up." I'd nod, but worry settled in my stomach like a stone. He was all I had, and the thought of losing him made breathing difficult. One morning in October, I woke to unusual stillness. No coffee percolating, no Johnny Cash humming from the kitchen. I called out, "Grandpa." Silence. My heart accelerated as I pushed open his bedroom door. He lay motionless in bed, face peaceful but too pale. I rushed to him, shaking his shoulders, my voice breaking. "Grandpa, please wake up." But he remained still. I touched his hand. It was cold as the mountain stone. I stood paralyzed, the world tilting sideways. Somehow I managed to call 911, though I don't remember dialing. When the paramedics arrived, they confirmed what I couldn't accept: my grandfather had passed from a heart attack during the night. The following hours blurred together like a watercolor in rain. I sat in our living room clutching the titanium bracelet while neighbors came and went. Each brought stories: how he'd fixed their computers for free, how he'd mentored their children, how he'd quietly paid for groceries when times were tough. I listened, but couldn't speak. My mind kept repeating one question: why did you leave me, Grandpa? The funeral was held at the small chapel in town where he'd taken me every Sunday. The pews overflowed with mourners, teachers, engineers, even executives in expensive suits I'd never seen before. I stood beside the casket, studying his peaceful face, wanting to shake him awake. But I just stood there, gripping the bracelet, feeling it was the only thing preventing me from shattering completely. As the pastor spoke about legacy and love, I remembered our evenings by the fire, his lessons about coding, patience, and purpose. "You are my tomorrow," he'd said once. Now he was gone, and I didn't know how to face even today. Yet I knew that somehow for him I had to find the strength to continue. That day at the funeral, as I stood outside the chapel thanking mourners, a pristine Mercedes pulled up. The door opened and I saw them, my parents. They emerged impeccably dressed in designer black, but their eyes were calculating, not grieving. My mother approached, embracing me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "Marcus, we're so sorry. We've thought about you every day." My father stood behind her, nodding stiffly, his expression unreadable. I stood rigid, not returning the embrace. It felt like a glass wall separated us. Part of me wanted to believe them, to think they'd returned out of genuine regret. But when they guided me to a quiet corner behind the chapel, my mother's tone shifted to something slick and practiced. "Marcus, you're a man now. We should reunite as a family. Your parents will help you handle everything Sam left behind." The phrase, "everything Sam left behind," sent ice through my veins. I studied my father. He avoided eye contact, but I saw the tension in his jaw. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother smiled, touching my arm with manicured fingers. "Well, you know, your grandfather had significant assets. The property, his company holdings, investments. We need to discuss arrangements." My pulse pounded as I stepped away from her touch. He wasn't even buried yet, and they were already circling like vultures. "I don't have anything to discuss with you," I said, turning to leave. But she grabbed my wrist, her voice sharpening beneath the sweetness. "Don't be naive, Marcus. You need your parents. You can't manage that kind of wealth alone." I yanked free, facing them both. 10 years. You vanished for 10 years. Not one call, not one letter. And now you want to talk about his money. My father finally spoke, his tone low and threatening. "Watch your attitude, Marcus. We're still your parents." I laughed bitterly, feeling fire ignite in my chest. Parents, you abandoned me when I was 8. Don't pretend nothing happened, and don't assume I'm some naive kid. I walked away without looking back, though my heart was churning. They'd booked rooms at the town's inn. Over the following days, they called, repeatedly texted, constantly, even appeared at the cabin. Each encounter reminded me of my grandfather's words. They were consumed by greed. I knew they hadn't returned for me. They wanted his wealth, something I hadn't even fully grasped yet. But I was also frightened. I was just 18. How could I stand against them? A week after the funeral, I was summoned to a law firm in Denver. Ms. Rebecca Chen, my grandfather's attorney, welcomed me in a modern office overlooking the city skyline. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed but warm. "Marcus," she said, offering me water, "are you prepared for this?" I nodded, though my stomach churned. My parents were there too, seated across the conference table, their faces carefully neutral but their eyes hungry. Ms. Chen opened a folder and began reading the will. Her voice was steady, but each word hit like thunder. My grandfather had left me everything: the cabin shares in a software company worth over 80 million, and various investments totaling more than 100 million. I sat stunned, unable to process it. I'd never imagined he possessed such wealth. To me, he was just a man in worn boots who taught me to code and made pancakes on Sundays. My mother laughed, unable to contain herself. "How wonderful, Marcus. We'll help you manage everything properly." But Ms. Chen raised her hand firmly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrison, but the will is explicit. Marcus is legally an adult and the sole beneficiary. There are no provisions for parental oversight." My father slammed the table, voice booming. "This is ridiculous. We're his parents." Ms. Chen remained composed, producing a small device from a wooden box. To verify the heir's identity, Mr. Samuel requested biometric confirmation via the bracelet. I extended my trembling arm, the titanium bracelet catching the light. She scanned it, and data appeared on her screen. "Perfect match," she confirmed. "This bracelet is the key, Marcus. Mr. Samuel embedded it with encrypted biometric data to ensure only you could claim the inheritance." My mother's face drained of color, and my father shouted, "A bracelet!" The old fool was paranoid. But Ms. Chen didn't flinch. She produced another document, her voice arctic. "Additionally, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, you legally relinquished all parental rights to Marcus. 11 years ago when you signed these documents. You have no legal claim here." The room felt frozen. I looked at my parents, seeing desperation and rage in their eyes. My mother tried to speak, but only stammered. My father stood pointing at me. "You'll regret this, Marcus. You don't understand what you're doing." I didn't respond, just touched the bracelet, feeling its weight. It wasn't just jewelry, it was armor my grandfather had forged to protect me from the very people who'd discarded me. As they stormed out, Miss Chen touched my shoulder gently. "Are you all right, Marcus?" I nodded, though inside I was reeling. I'd just inherited a fortune, but all I wanted was my grandfather back. Through the window, I watched my parents disappear into the Denver traffic. They wouldn't give up. I knew that, but I also knew, thanks to him, I had the strength to face whatever came next. The rain had started falling over Denver as I left the law office, the titanium bracelet on my wrist feeling heavier than the mountains themselves. I drove my grandfather's old pickup back to the cabin, my mind spinning. $100 million. The number felt surreal, abstract. Money had never mattered to me. He was just the man who taught me to debug code, track elk, and live with integrity. Now I faced a fortune my parents would do anything to claim. They didn't wait long to escalate. 3 days later, while I was winterizing the cabin's pipes, a black BMW navigated the mountain road. My father emerged dressed in an expensive suit already dusted with pine pollen. My mother followed her heels, impractical on the gravel path. I stopped working, wiping my hands on my jeans, my gut tightening. "Marcus," she called, her voice dripping false warmth. "We need to have a conversation." I folded my arms, meeting their gaze. "We already talked. There's nothing left to say." My father stepped forward, his eyes hard as granite. "Don't be stupid, Marcus. You don't understand how to handle that money. Without us, you'll be bankrupt within a year." I laughed, the sound harsh in the mountain air. "Bankrupt, like how you tried to bankrupt Grandpa by stealing from him." My mother interjected, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We made mistakes, Marcus, but we're family. You can't just abandon your parents." I looked at her, seeing through the performance entirely. Family doesn't dump their 8-year-old and disappear for a decade. You came back for his money, not for me. The tension crackled like electricity. My father's fists clenched, his voice dropping to a growl. "Be careful, Marcus. We could go public. Tell everyone you manipulated a senile old man into leaving you everything. This whole town could turn against you." My blood ran cold at the threat. The thought of their lies poisoning the community that had embraced me was terrifying. But then I remembered Grandpa's lessons, the bracelet's weight, his faith in me. "Nobody makes you doubt yourself, Marcus." I took a steady breath, stepping closer to my father. "You want to spread lies? Go ahead. Tell them how you committed fraud against your own father. Tell them how you abandoned your son without a backward glance. Try it. I'll tell the truth." I pointed down the mountain road. "Now leave. Next time I'm calling the sheriff." My mother went pale and my father stepped back, clearly not expecting resistance. They retreated to their car, but before closing the door, my father's voice was ice. "This isn't over, Marcus." Their BMW disappeared down the switchbacks, leaving me alone with the wind and my racing heart. I touched the bracelet, feeling "build tomorrow" etched against my skin. I knew they'd return with lawyers' lies, maybe worse. But this time I wasn't afraid. The following week, I was called to my grandfather's company headquarters in Boulder, a gleaming building of glass and steel worlds, away from our simple cabin. Ms. Chen accompanied me. "You need to establish your presence, Marcus," she advised. "The board needs to meet the new majority shareholder." I wore my only suit, feeling completely out of place among the polished executives. But entering the boardroom, I saw curiosity and skepticism in equal measure around the mahogany table. Ms. Chen introduced me firmly. "This is Marcus Harrison, sole heir to Samuel Harrison's 51% stake." An older woman, the CEO, leaned forward. "No disrespect, Marcus, but you're very young. What are your intentions for this company?" I breathed deeply, channeling every lesson from the workshop. "I won't pretend to know everything," I said. "But my grandfather taught me that technology should serve humanity. I'll honor his vision, innovation with purpose, not just profit." The meeting continued for hours. I sensed the mood shifting from doubt to intrigue, then cautious respect. But as I left the boardroom, an assistant caught up with me, whispering urgently, "Mr. Harrison, your parents are in the lobby with someone. They said it's urgent." My heart sank. I knew they wouldn't surrender easily. In the lobby, I found my parents flanked by a man in a gray suit. My father approached, his demeanor coldly professional. "Marcus, meet Mr. Fitzgerald, our attorney. We've found grounds to contest the will. Unless you agree to split the inheritance, we'll take this to court." Fitzgerald handed me a thick folder, his smile predatory. "You should review this, Mr. Harrison. Litigation could take years and cost millions." I looked at them, feeling trapped. But then I remembered Grandpa teaching me to debug code. "Break the problem down, Marcus. Don't panic." I met Fitzgerald's stare. "If you believe the will is invalid, file your lawsuit. But I have the bracelet, his authentication, and the truth. These two," I gestured at my parents, "legally abandoned me. They have no standing." My mother's composure cracked. "Marcus, how can you be so heartless?" But I continued, turning to my father, my voice steady as mountain stone. "You want to fight, fine. But if this goes public, I'll reveal everything. The fraud, the abandonment, all of it. Everyone will know exactly who you are. I stepped toward the exit. Leave. Don't contact me again. They stood frozen, shocked. Fitzgerald muttered something about reconsidering, but my father silenced him with a gesture. They left without another word. As the glass doors closed, I exhaled, shakily, feeling like I'd just survived an avalanche. Ms. Chen, who'd been observing from nearby, approached. Well handled, Marcus. Sam would be impressed. That night at the cabin, sleep eluded me. I sat at the kitchen table opening the wooden box my grandfather had left. Inside was his journal pages, yellowed with age, chronicling his journey from a young programmer to building his company to raising me. I read through tears, each entry pulling me back to our shared moments. But the final entry stopped my breath. He'd written, Marcus, you are my greatest achievement. If you're reading this, I'm gone, but you're not alone. Use what I've left to build bridges for others who've been abandoned. Create Tomorrow's Foundation, a program for foster children to learn technology and find their path. Let them know someone believes in them as I believe in you. I sat there, tears falling freely. He hadn't just left money, he'd left a mission. The next morning I called Ms. Chen, telling her about Tomorrow's Foundation. She smiled through the phone. I wondered when you'd mention this. Sam was certain you'd want to build it. I threw myself into the work. I assembled advisors, connected with foster care advocates, and planned the foundation's structure. I wanted it to be more than scholarships, a complete support system where abandoned children could learn, grow, and know they mattered. I hired a small team, converting part of the mountain property into the foundation's first learning center. Each day, I reviewed applications from children who needed help, feeling my grandfather's presence guiding every decision. Not everyone supported the venture. Some board members questioned my age and experience, urging me to sell my shares and let adults handle things. I refused, remembering his words. You're your own person, Marcus. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I presented the foundation's vision to the board, promising to maintain the company's innovative edge while serving a greater purpose. Gradually, most came to support the idea, though skeptics remained. One snowy afternoon, I stood watching the first group of foster children in our program, their faces lit with wonder as they programmed their first apps. I touched the bracelet, feeling build tomorrow like a heartbeat. I wasn't just maintaining his legacy, I was building something new. And now here I am sharing this story with you. A multi-millionaire carrying scars that shaped who I've become. Tomorrow's Foundation has operated for over 17 years now. From a few lines in my grandfather's journal, it's grown into a beacon for thousands of foster children nationwide. We've built learning centers, funded full-ride scholarships, and created coding boot camps where kids can dream without limits. I still remember our first graduate, a girl named Sarah, who'd been through 7 foster homes. Her eyes shone with tears as she demoed her first app. Today, she's our foundation's head of engineering, one of many success stories born from belief and opportunity. These young people haven't just survived, they're innovating, creating, changing the world, one line of code at a time. My grandfather's company, now under my leadership, maintains his vision technology that serves humanity. Board meetings are filled with former foster children, brilliant minds who understand struggle and transformation. Every time I see them present their ideas, I see echoes of him, his patient smile, his unwavering faith. I still drive his old pickup, still live simply at the cabin, though I could buy anything. True wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in the children finding their voice, the tomorrow we're building together. I run my fingers over the titanium bracelet, Build Tomorrow, still sharp after all these years. It reminds me that regardless of how we start, we can choose to rise, to create, to matter. Someday, I'll pass this bracelet to my daughter when she's ready to build her own tomorrow. Thank you for listening to my story.